everyone, and welcome back to my sewing room. I'm Rebecca, and today I wanted to try to do something that I have never done before and don't really know how to do because I thought it would be more fun in these quarantined times. So I've decided I have this Buckram hat form that I've had for a while. I got secondhand, I don't remember where, but I've had this for quite some time, and my blue dress needs a hat. So I've decided to try to cover this hat form with the supplies that I have on hand. So part of that is I know that I should mull this. I can't because I have no flannel or other mulling things other than like just using cotton. So we're gonna see how this works. I haven't looked up a tutorial ahead of time, though that said I have made hats before. I've made them with the Buckram and everything, but I've never covered a pre-made Buckram form. So this might be interesting, but let's see how this goes. Okay, so this is the cotton. I'm making this matchy because I'm not creative. I don't know, because I don't feel like trying to figure something else out right now. Okay, so my thought is that if I do 2 layers, one for the inside of the brim, one for the outside of the brim, and just kind of trace around the brim, my thought is that that will give me the right shape. So I'm going to trace around this just slightly outside of it. I will bind this at the end is my plan. So I believe I just need the actual dimensions of this hat. I don't need anything extra. And sorry if you can't see exactly what I'm doing. I will try to move this back because I think I'm out of frame and also totally washed out, but yeah, mostly I'm totally washed out. I haven't done a video like this and I don't have a great setup for this, so this is gonna be odd. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so I've traced that, and now I figure I just need to go at least a ½ inch in from where the inside is. So I'm going to measure the depth of my brim, which is just, looks like 2 inches and 1/8. Make sure that's the same all the way around. Yeah, it looks like we're at 2 inches and 1/8. So now we're gonna measure in. I'm gonna give myself 5/8 inch, so we're gonna go 2 3/4 inches inside as our circle. Personally, I kind of love watching videos where people are experimenting with things, like hairstyle tutorials that they've never done before or whatever. I think it's a fun challenge and, you know, shows people a little bit less polished, which is fun. Okay, so I'm going around and I'm marking in 2 3/4 inches, and then I should be able to just cut that. Okay, so that's 2 3/4 inches. I'm gonna trace it out and make it a little more even because it just doesn't seem quite round, and I can always balance it later. I'm also doing this on the back side of this fabric because, just a heads up, this is the Supima cotton from Joann's. So it's that super nice, super sateen, super fray-y cotton. But also, as much as I love friction pens, I don't have my lid on, but highly recommend these. That said, there are some fabrics out there that friction pens don't fully come off of, and Supima cotton is one of them. So just a warning, if you're working with Supima cotton, only mark on the inside of the fabric. There are actually places on this bodice where there are markings that won't come off because I didn't know that. So yeah, be careful. I'm gonna go ahead and cut out my circles now. Remember, this is total experimentation. Oh, also, I make basically all of my hats using a lot of hot glue, so just to warn you, if you were expecting this to be a fully hand-sewn experimental hat, you've come to the wrong video. just not really what I do. Okay. So first test. Looks kind of like the inside of a hat, so that's good. The outside should work too. Okay, what we need to do is we need to cut around the circle. You can't see what I'm doing. We need to cut around the inner circle with little snips. It's a weird angle. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, not deep enough. But you know what? We're not far off. That's not bad. I really feel like I'm gonna want some mulling something in there. I don't know. To be honest, I don't think I've ever molded a hat before, but I know it's something I'm supposed to do. So, yeah. Okay. Well, these need to be a little bigger. How's that? It's looking not bad. All right. I think we're there with that piece. It's laying pretty okay considering it's just pushed down on top. So now I will do, I guess I should do the same with the other piece. I'm also really curious about how hot glue is going to react with this. So that might be interesting. All right, I've decided that my next step is going to be putting a little spot of glue on each of these crenellations, for lack of a better term, so that they can stay in place and that this will be secured into place. While I'm at it, I'm also going to put a little bit of glue down on the outside, almost to act like basting. I do want to be able to stitch binding onto the outside, so I don't want to do a lot of glue because I don't want to have to sew through it. But right on the wire, which this form came pre-wired, so right on the wire, I figure I'm probably safe because I'm not going to be sewing on wire anyway. And of course, I can already see how this hat probably would have looked better had I been able to mull it, because the buckram is a little wrinkly and that wrinkle is showing up on here, but I don't have flannel or really anything like that. Well, that's a lie. I do have flannel. I have dark green plaid flannel and I have salmon check flannel, both of which would almost certainly show through this fabric. So, but that is somehow all of the flannel that I have. I've noticed that it's easier to put the glue on the crenellations where I have already glued down the edge, just because it almost acts like an additional hand. I make my hats, almost all of my hats are like super quick and dirty hat, because it's the last thing that I usually do before I am finished with something for an event. I also have a lot of hats that I wear with multiple outfits because, I don't know, I'll just make like a neutral kind of hat that I can use for multiple things in the same era. So yeah, there's really only 2 of my hats, I think, that have significant amounts of sewing in them, and I'm pretty sure both of those still also have glue. You know, I'll never use hot glue on a dress, but for some reason it just seems like the right thing to do on a hat. Alright, so that part is glued down. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the inside as I just did with the outside. This hat is not round, so I do have to find where I laid it out. Okay. So again, I am just putting glue on the wire. This is where I definitely need mulling because this hat actually already had like a binding on it out of Buckram. But, yeah. I'm just gonna hide it with trim, I guess, because I don't have flannel. I'm trying to be good, not leave the house. Today is actually my first day of not leaving the house because I was still at work all week and maybe at work next week. All right. So that is the outside edge done. Now I'm going to do the inside. I think I'm actually going to start by doing like one every few, because if I don't need to do every one, then I won't. I'm also fairly certain, yeah, back here I'm gonna have to cut this so it's a little longer. So let's do these first. I've also got some excess fabric that goes way out past. So we're just gonna cut some of that off. But because this fabric frays so much, I'm glad that I have a little bit because I don't want it to fray past where I glued it. So now I'm going to attempt to do the pieces for the top of the crown. This may be a challenge because this is actually rounded a little bit, so I'm not exactly sure if this will work. I was just going to trace around it. So yeah, luckily again, I do have more fabric. This is all fabric left over for my dress that I basically went to every fabric store in the area and bought all of, because I had purchased 10 yards, I think, no, 12 yards, 10 or 12 yards last year when it was on a super sale, but it's narrow. And so that was not enough for this dress. This is way more. So I went out and I bought I think a 3-yard piece, a 4-yard piece, and an 8-yard piece, because I got them in different order. I got like the 3-yard piece, then the 8-yard piece, and the 4-yard piece. And then I realized the 3 and the 4 would be fine together. And I think I have like a yard left out of the 3 and the 4 together. So I'm returning the 8-yard piece, but I still have like a yard left to do this hat. So anyway, and these are all scraps right now. Let's go ahead and try this. I don't know. And I'm gonna give it a wide berth too. So I think I'm just gonna kind of push down and trace around. This probably would have been easier when I hadn't covered the brim, because then I could have seen through it better, but you know, that's what happens when you're experimenting. Okay, we've got ourselves kind of a circle oval deal going on. It's so washed out on my fabric table because I need to see, but that means you can't see very well. Okay, and then we're gonna add, I'm gonna add like a good amount to this, honestly. Maybe even like 3/4 of an inch, maybe even an inch on either side, because I don't trust this at all. So this is super approximate, and I'm just gonna eyeball it, because if I'm doing this experimental and everything, why not just eyeball, basically. Again, I'm drawing this on the wrong side of the fabric because it won't come off otherwise. It will come off, it will lighten, it won't be hot pink, but you will get kind of almost like a scar, like a pale scar, so it's not pretty. Oh, and I'm doing 2 of this also because one of these is for the inside of the crown. Okay, so let's see. Okay, yeah, I think that'll work. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to put glue around the outside of the Buckram crown, and we'll see what we get with that. That way I can kind of like smooth it and curve it, and it'll stick in place. So if you don't have a Buckram frame handy, this same sort of thing should work just fine with a straw base. I have covered a straw brim before because I did that with my like Vigée Lebrun riding habit-ish thing. So that, like, I have done that, but I've never done the crown before. So, but that worked just fine. It's super smooth, and I think it looks nice. I guess I'll go ahead and do the inside of it first. I'm just gonna put some glue down on the inside. Just around the corner like I was just doing, except that the angle is annoying in here. And let's push that nicely into the inside too. So now we have that and that. Okay, so now I'm going to like snip wedges like you're clipping a curve out of this, because otherwise I'm going to get a lot of bulk under the band. So we're just going to snip some nice big wedges out like that, which should alleviate that bulk. Just be sure that you don't clip too close to the edge, because otherwise it will show. So before I go too far, I want to make sure that this plan will actually work. So I am going to put some glue. I think that should work fine at alleviating the bulk. So let's finish doing the rest. Okay. Ta-da! Looks like on the side. Almost makes an interesting pattern. And I think this is so visually pleasing. I'm not going to leave it like that, but it just looks really pretty. The inside, I honestly don't care if it's smooth, so I think I might actually just pleat kind of that down in place and secure it with glue. This part I'm doing by putting a dab of glue on the Buckram itself, as opposed to for the outside I was doing it on the fabric. We will be putting a band of fabric, both the inside and the outside, so like it doesn't really matter what this part looks like, in my opinion. Though I guess if it looks nice, I need a shorter band. But ta-da! That's done on the inside. Cool. Okay, so the hat band is the one part that I do wonder if I can actually do with glue. I'm not really sure. I do actually frequently, if not always, wind up sewing the band to the crown at the top. I'm not trained in hat making, by the way. Did I say that at the beginning? I'm not trained at all in hat making. I don't know the proper way to do things, but I do usually sew that at the top just because I feel like it must give a cleaner finish. I think I've probably tried with glue before and it came out ugly, which is why I've sewn it. So we're going to try glue and see what happens. I also am not 100% positive if I want to do this on the straight grain or not, but I happen to already have a strip that appears to be wide enough that is cut on the straight grain. I think this was, I don't know, left over from something on the dress. Oh, it was left over from like the neckline or sleeve trim or whatever. And I did not wind up needing it. So I figure since it's already cut, I'm just gonna go ahead and try sewing or pressing down one side to start off with and cutting off the copious amounts of fray that have occurred just from it sitting on my sewing table for the last like month. It's frayed so much. I've already cut off some of it, but like, look at this. This is what this Supima cotton does. Just to warn you people, if you've never used it, you've been warned. Okay. So I'm not sure that this is gonna work. I guess I should determine which one should be the front of the hat. I like that. That looks like a front. Okay, so this is gonna be the back. So I want my seam in the back, like right here. I'm just gonna make a little mark. That's where I want my seam. Okay, so actually, glue. Yeah, let's see how this will work. I am taking this folded over edge and we're just gonna put a little bit of glue right along the top of that folded edge to begin with. And line that up, like not quite at the top, but where it's curving down just a little bit. Again, I don't know if this is gonna work. We shall see. I don't want it to like squidge up because this isn't an area that I can easily hide with trim. I do plan to put trim around the band, but not really like at the top of the band where it meets the crown. Oh shoot, and I'm out of the frame again. Sorry guys. This looks pretty decent actually. So what I'm doing to try to make sure that the glue doesn't squidge up is I'm kind of like putting the top of it on down and then coming down. If that made any sense. I'm also probably going to run into an issue here because I did not fold and or trim the bottom of this band yet, so it's not wanting to make a circle. So I think I will just kind of fold it in. And I'll worry about the actual length. I'll fix the actual length later, but I just want it to go around the hat right now, which it won't do if it's not folded in. So clearly I should have pressed both sides first, but I didn't. I swear this fabric frays if you like think about it. You don't even have to look at it. You just have to think about it. That said, it is gorgeous cotton. Can be gotten for pretty inexpensive with a coupon, or like if you get one of the clearance colors, because right now this color, for example, is on clearance, or it was a couple weeks ago. They just, I guess, added a whole bunch of new colors. But yeah, like I originally bought this because they had some sort of a weird super sale where they forgot to not allow coupons on top of it or something. So I originally got this for like $4 something a yard. I think it's listed for like $14 a yard. And it's really lovely. I mean, Joann's has never had better sateen, at least in all my years of sewing, so I'm happy with it. It just frays like nobody's business. I tend to like decorating hats a lot more than making them. Just because making them, I feel like it's a little tedious. And like the couple of times that I have actually hand sewn hats, it takes forever. I think I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I'm a very impatient person. I really like instant gratification. Ask me why I got into historical costuming. I don't know, there's not a lot of instant gratification there, but one thing that can be kind of are hats. Ish. Which I probably should have done this on the bias. So what I'm finding with this is that not only am I going to need to fold it, this is the bottom here, but I also need to clip it because I'm getting weird pulls. And I think that a couple of clips should alleviate that. I'll smooth out the wrinkles hopefully later. Okay. We're almost to the end, so I'm going to cut this where I need to, which will be here plus a 1/2 inch. approximately there. Ooh, and I left it so it's not wide enough. We'll figure it out. Okay, I'm gonna glue the end of this down. And I'm probably gonna have to put some decoration right in the center back because I cut that strip too short. I think I'm actually gonna put a dab of glue here and then a pin to hold it because I think it's got too much pressure on it right now since I'm like moving it around and stuff. And yeah, I've just got a little bit that's gonna wind up showing. So I will cover that with a decoration. One of the reasons that I'm totally not concerned about this band looking perfect is because I had fully intended to like cover this band. I'm actually like kind of thinking that I don't even need to secure the bottom of the band because it's so tightly pulled on here right now that like once everything is tucked up, I don't think it's going anywhere. So the band is wrinkly, but like again, I'm not super worried about that. I'm gonna leave that pin on here for the time being to hold it in place. But I mean, basically, here's our hat. It needs binding around the edge and it needs decorating. So, oh yeah, and I guess it needs an inside band. The buckram is like almost covered, but there's a lot of raw edges there. And as we've discussed, this fabric frays like crazy. So I will be putting a band in there too. So as it turns out, I think the rest of this strip should be long enough to actually do the band for the inside. So this time I did kind of briefly measure it just to see if it would work. I think this width is right. So I'm going to press this down, which is what I should have done on the outside too, probably. But again, this is an experiment, so you know, you get what you get. And you will all be able to learn from my mistakes, hopefully. That's what I think is fun about this. Okay, we are going to glue a little bit of the edge of this. Doesn't really matter where we start, but I'm kind of trying to go for the back. And there we go. I'm stuck. Okay. And actually, I think I'm gonna glue directly onto the hat instead. That just seems easier. And then lay this hopefully on top. The real thing that's like throwing everything off on this is the fact that the outside, the bottom of the band is actually a little bit longer than the top of the band. It's slightly domed. And so it's making everything funky. Because of that, I am going to do the base of the band, like as I'm doing the inside. I might even go farther on the base. Because I mean, like, it's the inside of a hat. I don't really care, you know, if there's wrinkles, whatever, then there's wrinkles. But yeah, I think doing the outside here is going to be easier. Yeah, okay, I'm definitely glad that I switched to the bottom because, like, can you see how wrinkly the inside's going to wind up needing to be? Like, kind of how pleated, whatever. It's definitely, you can really see, A, that I should have done this on the bias, because B, how much wider around the, why did I do this way? How much wider around the base of the crown is than the top. I feel like with hat making, you can just, like, you could always use another hand. Maybe it's just me. So there is the base of the crown. Now we've got to go back and fix all of this sort of gatheredness. Of the inside, which is going to make for some weird gluing angles. But I still do have to do the bias on the outside, so there's glue everywhere. I know, I should expect it, right? That's what I get for doing projects with this much glue. Okay, so one side of the bias on the outside is going to be sewn on by machine, because gluing down bias is just not very pleasant. And the other side will probably be sewn by hand. So I can't get away with gluing everything. I mean, I probably can, but I think it would look ugly. And that's the one place where it's like stuff shows. So what I have to decide is which side's going to be which one's going to be by hand, which side's going to be by machine. Now on a large hat, because I am tall, I will pretty much always do the underside of the brim by machine and then turn the bias up to the top side of the brim and do that by hand, because the machine side you don't see any stitches and the hand side you still see hand stitches, and I'd rather see no stitches. Because I'm tall, most people, I would say like all but 5-ish people, look up to the bottom side of my hat if it is a large hat. Those 5 people can look down and see those hand stitches, but everyone else looks up. So that's the side that I want it to be the neatest. This is a little hat, so it's not quite such a big deal. I'm going to take that pin out now because it's really going to be more like this. But you know what? I think people are still going to be looking up first, so I think I'm still going to do this by machine if I can. It might very well be that the crown is in the way. Normally when I make a hat, when I make the buckram form of the hat, I make and cover the brim before attaching the crown. So it might very well be that the crown is in the way of me sewing like this around with the bias here and then flipping. This might be in the way of my machine. So if that's the case, then I will sew it this way, because this shouldn't be in the way of my machine. I should have clearance. And I can sew it here, and then I'll sew the other side by hand. So I'm going to experiment. Oh look, it's Dora. And here's a cat while I experiment. Okay, so I'm going to make some bias. This is going to be like a double fold equivalent bias by cutting some strips here that are about 1.5 inches wide. Let's see, I should be on the bias. Yeah, that looks about right. Normally I would do this with a rotary cutter, but since they're just such small pieces, I didn't want to cut into my like 1 yard that was left, and this was already kind of biasy, so I will have an extra seam because of that, but I just didn't like the idea of like wasting a ton of fabric, so which is what happens when you cut things on bias. So I measured my store-bought double fold, and it is about 2 inches wide, and I didn't like how wide that looked on my hat. So this is kind of a test. So I decided I was going to try this at 1.5 inches wide and see if that works. If not, I'll cut more. Okay, I'm going to press my bias, and I don't want to press the middle seam, so I'm just kind of going to eyeball the sides and press that down, both sides. Alright, bias is pressed. Now we will test it through the machine. Okay, so clearly this is not going to work. I can't get it by the foot, so I'm going to have to go this direction. hopefully this will work. It does appear that it will work, I think. It's going to be really narrow on the inside, so it's probably good that I'm doing it by hand because it just takes a little bit more bulk, but it will go like that. So I'm going to sew this part down by hand. I will check back with you later. Hello everyone, I am back and it's another day and we are going to finish the hat, as Stephen Sondheim would say. Happy birthday, Sondheim. We share the same birthday, which is March 22nd, aka tomorrow from when I'm filming this, so yay. Anyway, this hat is actually kind of like finished as is. I went ahead and I stitched down all of the binding on the outside here. I also, you probably can see, decided I was going to go ahead and stitch this down too, even though this is inside the hat. It was just gaping a little bit much for my liking, so I went ahead and stitched that down too. I'm going to leave this unstitched, at least for now, unless it like really bugs me. I'm just going to leave that glued because I think it glued pretty nicely, but this one was way more gappy on the inside, and since this gets all of the wear from when you're putting it on, I didn't want that to like pull at my hair or come more undone or anything like that. So anyway, the hat is finished. You might also notice that I have shaped the brim a little bit from how it was yesterday. Yesterday it was quite flat, and I looked at my favorite resource for accessories and everything for historical costuming, which is this book right here. If I can find it on Amazon, I will leave a link to it in the description. I've had this book forever and it is amazing. Like seriously, pretty much every outfit that I make accessories for, I turn to this book to just double check that I am doing the accessories right. Because for example, we're on 1871 right now. The pages are dated in the lower corners, and then you have all sorts of accessories, and it goes year by year. So like now we're on 1872, 1873 over here, and it's just amazing. So I was looking at hats from the early 70s because that's when this dress dates to, and although hers is a little bit flatter right here, most people have a fairly curved brim. This one here, the next page, I love hers. Everyone has a fairly curved brim for the most part. So I decided I want my brim to be a little bit curved. Now that said, I don't know what this, I mean, it appeared to be buckram and wired, but it is not super bendy. And when I was bending it, one of the wires actually wanted to poke out through the binding. So I'm trying to do this super, super carefully, and I just don't really want to take it too extreme because I'm not really sure what these wires are doing. But all I'm really doing here is literally just bending it by hand. You can see I just got even a little bit more shape there. And I can continue doing that after I've decorated it, but I find that it's easiest to do this step before you put any decoration on because you're still working on the foundation of the hat. So now if I get down here, you can see that this hat is much nicer shape. If I had my hair done, it would tilt up a little bit more too and would be much more accurate for that shape. So we're just going to go with this for the meantime and start looking at decorations. So one of the things that I noticed when I was binding this hat is that I should not have cut off that extra ½ inch of the binding. I probably should have left it because, as you can see, if it focuses on this, well, it might not focus, but you can probably see in its unfocused way that the stitches from the machine stitching from the top side can be seen on the bottom. And as I mentioned previously, most people are looking up at a hat on me, so they're likely to see the bottom, especially here with the brim bent up. So I want to cover that. Now, I didn't necessarily see any of this happening in those few hats in the book, but I think a lot of times, and especially prior to this, you do have trims and laces and stuff that are on the bottom, kind of on the edge. So that was my idea. I took some of the lace that is on the dress, like on the sleeves, on the skirt, etc. I took some of that and I gathered it. And this is just a vintage lace that I happen to have copious yards of in my stash, thank goodness. And I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to glue this around the outside and not sew it. I gathered it by machine. I'm going to glue this around the edge just so that I can do a really kind of like subtle gathering so that it'll just cover the edge and cover that binding. So I want the lace to stick out past the edge just a tiny bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start gluing this down, and I'm just going to put a little dot on the binding part of the brim as well as farther in. This is just really to anchor the end of the lace at this point. And I've got my gathering here. I'm going to really kind of spread those gathers as I go along so that it can really lay like almost flat is what I want by the time it gets to the outside. I want it to be pretty much flat like that as I'm going around. So just a tiny bit of ruffle, if you will. So to do that, I'm going to create anchor points here. Everywhere that I think, okay, well that's a good kind of stopping point, I'm going to create just a little anchor point. It's almost like I'm tacking the lace down, except, you know, with glue. I am kind of thinking that I want to like take pictures in this outfit later today, so I want this hat done, since I'm obviously not wearing it in Port Townsend at the Victorian Festival this weekend, which is where I was supposed to be and what I was making this dress for. So hopefully once all of this is over, we'll be able to do some sort of like a picnic or something. And if not, I guess this will be making its debut otherwise at Costume College. But, I mean, like, provided Costume College happens. Oh my god, Costume College better happen. Yeah, but I want to get some pictures. I'm going to fold in the edge like so, and then glue that edge down. I think that will be it for the underside of the brim. That now looks like that, and will look like that on my head. So now comes the really fun part, which is decorating the hat. Off camera, I went and ran around my sewing room and found a whole bunch of random things that looked good together on a hat, and kind of just like threw them there while I was wearing it on top of my head. I was just like, oh yeah, let's try this here, this here, this here. Let's see what works. So what I came up with was this. Everything is very loosely arranged right now. This is the front right here. Everything's super loosely arranged. It's literally just stacked on top of the hat with like maybe 2 pins in it. And we are going to try and recreate me assembling this. I think the very first thing I'm going to do is, I have this sort of like confection of organza here. Some with lace, some without, and I think the first thing I want to do is arrange that in a pleasing manner. This is actually stuff that is left over from, which is it from? It's either from last year's gala gown, which might be possible, or it's from the giant turquoise ball gown. But what this is part of it was pleated with the lace added and like serged on the other edge and stuff. So part of it was finished, and then the other part was kind of like the leftover that I could join to more if I needed. So it's gathered like with the ruffle foot, but it didn't have the lace because I think I ran out, and it wasn't like finished on the inside or anything. It's pinned in place right now and I don't hate it, but we're going to make it just slightly better and glue it in place. So part of that is that I want the ends to like be in more. And actually this is going right over that ugly back seam that I had on the hat, so we're killing a couple birds here, you know, metaphorically speaking. No birds will be harmed in the making of this hat. I'm not that historically accurate. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to glue directly onto their hats because they like to be able, ow, that one was hot. They like to be able to change out their decoration. I thought that at first, and so I made a few hats where I like sewed everything on. And you know what? I've never changed out the decorations. So when I make a hat, I make it and I like what it looks like. The only thing that I won't glue on necessarily are taller feathers, because if you glue on a taller feather, it makes your hat difficult to transport and to store. And yeah, so it's just not like practical. But I'm not really worried about this organdy being difficult like that. Okay, so I've got the sides fixed in place now. I think I'm gonna leave the bottom, or like the middle for now. This will have a band going around it, so it will wind up being a little bit more compressed. I might stick a little bit of glue right down in the center because this is coming up. That should make it a little bit more secure. So there is step one. Now, I think I'm going to take this. This is net. This is like a poly netting that I got from the Casa Collection section of Joann's a few years ago when I was making the turquoise ball gown. It's nice and soft net, obviously, and it really, I think it acts like how it would appear that silk netting acts like if you have that budget. What we're doing with this is we're making a kind of a zigzag shape on the brim, and I'm just gonna glue points. So we're just gluing some anchor points on this. Let's see, there's our first one. So I'm just kind of gathering it up and trying to go approximately the same width around, but I'm not too worried if it's not that even. I'm literally just doing a dab of glue and then moving on to the next point. And I'm actually, right now, I'm only gluing the inside towards the crown. I'm not gluing the points on the edge of the brim. I want this hat to basically look like confectionery. I will go back and glue the ones on the outside too, but those would be a lot more obvious if I screwed them up. So that's why I'm doing all these first. Sorry, I know this is super hard to see. Alright, and I reached the end of that. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to glue the outside points because actually it wound up ending just nice and perfectly even. So I really like the look of that. I know that no one really looks at the top of my head because I'm tall, but I still like it to look pretty. I'm 5'10", by the way. And that means that when I'm wearing this dress, I'll be wearing like 2-inch heels, so I'll be 6 feet tall. So yeah, I guess maybe there are some tall men, and there are a couple of taller costumers who can admire the top of my head, and the rest of you get to watch this video. So now I'm just going back and I'm laying a tiny little bit of glue down underneath those outside points. I highly recommend this net if you can still get it at Joann's, by the way, because this is like one of the best products I think that they've ever sold. Because generally I'm not a big fan of theirs, even though I have to shop there. And I feel like most of their stuff is like really poly looking. This is not. It actually looks really nice. Alrighty. That section is done. Glue strings and all. Ta-da! So now the hat looks like this. Okay, so obviously that means that the crown needs decoration. So what I'm doing for the crown is what I had kind of mocked up is I'm taking this wide velvet ribbon that is all over my dress and I'm wrapping the net around it just like loosely. So I think I'm going to anchor a point here first, because that way it will be like I have another hand. It's not a great anchor because it's actually anchored to the organdy, but it will still be something. So now I am going to go ahead and I'm going to just wrap this around so that this is kind of gathered in my hand and then twisted. It's coming ungathered. Oh, my arm's totally in the way. I'm kind of twisting and wrapping so that I get this neat little kind of ribbon effect. That's enough to go on for now. And now we're going to bring the band around and make sure things are evenly spaced, which they are currently not at all. I like where it's looking in the back, so I want to put a little dab of glue on the other side of our little organza here. Because that will again help to hold things in place. Okay. Now I have a better anchor. So I like it when it's a little bit closer spaced like this. So I'm going to take some of this off and kind of scooch up some of the ribbon, some of the net on the ribbon so that it happens more frequently, like that. And now I'm going to put some more glue dabs in place as I go around. And while I do that, I'm going to kind of pull the velvet ribbon a little bit so that it will be laying nicely against the hat. Cool. So now I'm going to glue just a little bit before the end. And then I am going to cut off my excess. I'm probably going to do tails or a bow of the netting, but right now I just have excess netting, so I'm going to carefully cut it off where it will be behind the ribbon so that it won't show. And then I also need to cut my ribbon. I want to have a little bit of an overlap and then turn it in. Glued my velvet ribbon down. So that is our band. Ta-da! And now I have some flowers and some feathers that I want to put on. Again, the feathers I'm going to probably just try to stick into the band because although these aren't super tall, they're taller than I can fit in a hat box. So these are not going to be glued in, they're just going to be placed, but I'm also going to do those last. I liked where I had these before, these little flowers. These guys fall apart easily, but I do like using them because I just feel like they look really realistic and I love the color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the excess stems off, and these I am going to glue into place. This is going to be inside of the organdy, so I'm just going to kind of bend the organdy down and glue onto the stems and then tuck them in. That way you can't see the stems, they'll be fully hidden within the organdy. I think they're over a little farther than I'd originally set them up for, but I think it will still be okay. So there's that part. And then my next one was this little flower strand I have here. And I liked having this just lay over. I'm going to tuck in the stem, which of course I want to tuck it in right where I had put a dab of glue. So we're gonna shove that in. Cool. And I think this has wire in it. It's really stiff wire, but it does have some wire in it, so I can actually bend that in place. I'm literally just going to put a dab of glue inside the ribbon where I've put the stem in, and I think that's all. I'll do a dab of glue on the end too, just so it stays in place. There's that. And then I had one other kind of sad looking blue flower here, and I think I'm still going to put him in here just to add a little bit more, add a little bit more texture. So this one I am again just kind of sticking down within the organdy, and I'll put a little dab of glue on him. And just press him in place. Okay, so the only thing left now is the feathers. Again, I'm not gluing the feathers in place, but I had them over here, so they should be able to just kind of stick into the band. And they're kind of blocking that flower, so like that. I'm going to add another mesh strip of streamers that I'm just going to glue in the back. I might make it into a bow. We shall see. Okay, so I made myself a little mesh bow. I didn't really film it because I was just playing around with stuff. But first I cut myself a fairly wide strip across the grain. And there's a thread in this bow. That's what I'm trying to get out. And I thought I was just going to do tails, and it wound up way too short to do tails out of the cross the grain. So what I did instead was I took it and I made it like a double thick wide bow. So that's what that is. And then I went the length of the grain. I have like, I don't know, 1.5 yards, 2 yards of this left, something like that. And I cut a narrower strip just with the tails. So, which is about the width that I did for the rest of what's on the hat. So that's what I used there. And I just put some glue in the center to hold it all together, wrapped the narrower tails around the wide tails. And now I'm going to use the last bit of glue for this hat. I hope I'm still like in the center back. I think I am. And put some glue right on the center here. So this is like over the lap of the ribbon. And affix my bow. Cool, that should stay. And then now I've got this poofy bow, which like you won't really see from the front, especially on this side. You will see it a bit on this side. But and with that, my hat is finished. Ta-da! So I don't know if I'm going to keep the feathers in there. I kind of like them, but I don't love them. So anyway, that is my hat. Thank you all so much for joining me on this weird experimental YouTube video. I think the project actually turned out super awesome. So if you do decide to try something like this yourself, I don't think you need to worry. I think it actually does work. And this is, again, mostly made with glue everywhere, which I'm pulling off the glue strings, but I think it really did come out good. It came out how I wanted it to. It came out well. It came out how I wanted it to, and I'm happy with the results. So don't be afraid to cover your own buckram with fabric and hot glue and decorations, because it winds up pretty cute. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me for this YouTube video. If you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you would like to see more videos from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a video. If you want to see more from me, please go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Lady Rebecca Fashions. I post there at least about once a day, if not more. And otherwise, I will see you in my next video next week on here. Happy sewing!